Who is the worst teacher you've ever had? Grade 10 English teacher. Had an assignment where we made up fake names and did a pen pull to other students in the class. He also joined the assignment and wrote inappropriate letters to one of the female students. What the frick? A college business statistics professor who only talked about how rich he was from learning statistics and how he had a Porsche with a radar detector in the front and back. I failed that one. The next professor was much better and I actually learned from her and passed. We had a professor who was similar. He would always talk about how successful he was. Once, he claimed that instead of sending a CV for a job application, he just sent a picture and got the job because he thought out of the box. 3rd grade teacher. She had her teacher's pet that could do no wrong. One day she gets a low score on her test and begins crying. To make her feel better, she points to the worst student in the class that probably had an undiagnosed learning disability and says in front of the whole class, "Don't worry, you could be like her and have an F carved into your report card." Double quote. Even 3rd grade me was like, wow, what a bee. I had the exact same thing happen with our French teacher. Teacher's pet was native French. Entire class started revolting and she ended up telling a couple of us to take off our shoes, which didn't exactly help to get respect. We were sent to the dean and we didn't get in trouble after telling the story. Best dean ever. The biochemistry department at my college has notoriously bad professors. I had one who in past years made a mistake grading an exam, giving some people points for wrong answers and marking down correct answers, but refused to regrade them. She was the stereotypical, bitter my class is hard and some of you will fail professor who thinks that suffering is a rite of passage in the sciences. She wouldn't upload slides, even when students were snowed in at home and the lecture recording malfunctioned. A lot of university professors don't care about their students, but this one truly made me feel like she wanted us to fail. By the 2nd week of class, I cried in lecture and went straight to my advisor after to switch from a BS to BA just to get out of her class. We had a professor at university who literally started his first lesson with a slide of last year's average that showed 10% of students passed his exam. If 90% fail your exam but succeed in other subjects, maybe they aren't all lazy, maybe your teaching sucks. Mrs. Davis in 1st grade. One time, I had a messy desk. You remember those ones with the top that flipped up so you could store your books and stuff inside? She picked up the desk and literally dumped all my books and school supplies on me and made me clean it up off the floor while the rest of the class watched. Of course I started crying. What kind of sadist does that to a freaking 6-year-old? She loved the boys, but always hated on and picked on the girls. Just as an example, I worked really hard on a project for her class. It came back with a D on it. My mom had had enough of her crap and took my project to the principal. She asked him to tell her what grade he would give the project. He looked it over and read through everything and said it was definitely A work. Mom showed him the grade she had given me on it. Teacher was spoken to and my grade changed. She also failed me in that class, along with several other females, claiming I had never turned in any homework. I had, but couldn't prove it. The boys in her class never received less than a B. The year after I had her, she retired after speaking with the principal and the school board again. I was a straight A student, except for her class. In middle school jazz band, teacher asked me to play a solo during one of our performances. After the performance the teacher congratulated us and told the soloists what a great job they did, except me. For me I was told how horrible I sounded in front of the group. Never performed a solo again, haha. Frick that teacher. You performed solo and aced yo. Well, funnily enough, my school history teacher was weird. She'd always give us strange assignments and tell weird stories about her personal life, but today I learned that she stabbed her husband in the stomach with a knife about a week ago. He's alive. 3rd grade teacher choked me against a blackboard. I remember looking out at my classmates and seeing the look of horror on their faces as I gasped for air. This was in '79. In the early 1980s I went to a Catholic school up until 8th grade. In 5th grade we had to do a report on a country in Europe. I was assigned Russia's political history. I worked really hard on my report and was already nervous about standing up in front of the class to give my speech. While giving my report, I had a very hard time pronouncing these very hard Russian names. I remember struggling and tried painfully to get through it. My teacher made me stop in the middle of my report and told me to sit down. Then she said, "Class, my name is a prime example of not being prepared. Learn from my name. I was so young and that affected me greatly. Thanks Mrs. K for planting the seed of anxiety, which I will have for the rest of my life. You truly made a lasting impression on one of your students." She literally shoved a ball of duct tape in my mouth in front of the whole class because I couldn't hold in my laughter after my friend said something funny. Mrs. Huddleston, grade 4. I had a troubled childhood, and I remember during that grade that I had found out my grandfather was divorcing my grandmother, and that he kicked her onto the ground and stepped on her while threatening her with an axe. So naturally, I probably had some issues, but I never acted out like an butthole kid. Anyways, she was trying to teach me something after class. Something with blocks and multiplication maybe, and I remember that she was getting angry and frustrated, so I was crying because my home life had a lot of anger and fighting. She eventually slammed the blocks on the desk in anger and started screaming at me, while other kids laughed. Now she wins awards for all of her good work. She could have had an off day, but that school memory sticks out to me more than any others during that time, and I'll never associate her with anything else. That was 1994 or something like that. Frick her. A teacher who wanted students to learn programming and the method of testing was filling the blank. No wonder most of them wanted me to tutor them. My math teacher was a terrible person. She once wanted to call my mom because I wasn't doing it how she wanted, and she got mad at me cause I didn't knew the mobile number of my mother. I think it was in 7th grade or so. She also told me in front of the whole class I'm not the brightest bulb. I had a professor who was awful at teaching. I never liked him. He eventually got fired after an investigation into him, sparked by PETA we were told, found that he was doing unethical testing on puppies and falsifying data for academic studies before coming to our college. I forget his name, but he taught genetics. A math teacher in grade 9. His name was Mr. Tingley. Not even kidding. The entire class, other than me, failed grade 9 math. None of us ever understood what he was saying. As an adult now I think he had dementia. I got 93% in math despite not knowing WTF was happening ever in that class. When I was doing placement forms for high school they tried to put me in academic challenge math. I said no way, just please let me do normal math. When I had my first test in grade 10 I got 34%. There was an emergency meeting with the teacher and the principal where they interrogated me about being on drugs. Nope, no drugs. For some unfathomable reason the Tingler, what we called him, liked me and gave me that ludicrous mark in his class. The grade 10 teacher suggested moving me to remedial math. I said no. I asked her to teach me grade 9 and grade 10 math in the same year. She said that would require 3 hours of homework per day just for the grade 9 math. I said fine. I wound up with 5 hours of math homework per night. I literally spent a year doing homework until 1 AM and getting only 4.5 hours of sleep per night to catch up. Ugh. Finished out the year with 85% in math 10, the normal matriculation math. That's so weird. I had a guidance counselor named Mr. Tingley. He liked to rub my shoulders. He asked me, did your father ever teach you how to act? I informed him that my father had died 4 years earlier. 2 weeks later my stepdad comes to pick me up for an appointment saying he's here to pick up his child. Teacher over the phone with the office. You mean the deceased father is here for pickup? All through high school that teacher just kept doubling down. Never showed remorse for what he had said. He would chase me into other classrooms because I had a hat on and I needed to take it off. This gave me motivation to become the compassionate, empathetic, and awesome teacher that I am today. My kids always get the benefit of the doubt and I respect them. Seems like that guy was a butthole to the end. We had a child predator for my 6th grade language arts class who was mentally insane. Mr. S immediately established himself as the de facto cool teacher of the school. In fact, as a teacher, he was quite generous to all the boys in the class who went along with his antics. I was not one of those. We had several books we had to read, and as the year progressed, We were woefully behind every single one of them, meaning that we were going to be unprepared for the standardized tests the district did at the end of the year, and rumors abounded that if we got low scores, we had to take remedial classes. I protested. Nobody cared. I started to suspect that he was fricked in the head when he started making off comments to other male students, and when he started to refer to the narrator of an audiobook we were listening to as his best friend. I read a lot and listened to many audiobook tapes and knew that the man was a renowned and respected voiceover artist, so I started having my doubts about him. One day in November, I came in on a Monday morning and the principal was in the class, and we were advised that Mr. S had gotten into trouble, had been fired, and would not be returning. The teachers refused to tell us anything more. Rumors swirled, but died away. Luckily for me, my mother was in the school district. One day, in 9th grade, I attended a social function. I asked a teacher about Mr. S. Apparently he had been grooming some kids he liked, and invited them over, where he gave them booze and pee. When he tried to go further, everybody freaked out and scrammed. He was promptly arrested the next day on his way into work. They found all sorts of unsavory crap at his place. My current Latin teacher. Surprise tests every week in subjects we either very barely study or just don't learn about. Nothing on classroom. No assignments. Literally no way of knowing the answers of the test. There was a sub that hit on me when I was a 15-year-old junior, describing his 4-inch dong and bragging about the other girls he banged but saying they were legal because he waited until they graduated and turned 18. Please tell me he got arrested. Tough to choose. Either the high school math teacher who pushed her students so hard, gave a punishing amount of homework, and did very little teaching. One of her students committed suicide because she put so much pressure in his life. She shrugged it off and continues in her position to this day. Or the community college teacher who locked the door so students couldn't get in or out of her classroom. A student told her that's illegal and, at the very least, she is breaking the FAR code. She said, if you have a complaint, go to the office and file one. If enough students complain, a committee might look at it. If they do, a ruling is still months away, and as a tenured professor, and personally friends with many people on this committee, I can tell you nothing will come of it. Also, all she did is try and sell us some self-published book she wrote, and she changed the date time of the final 4 times. He repeatedly tried to get female students' phone numbers and kept a poster of Britney Spears in his room. He was incredibly pervy and creepy. Yeah, that's weird. I was a nerdy student who was known to be liked by all teachers and students. This one art teacher decides that she does not like me, keeps telling me that my artwork was basically crap and I should redo it, and at the end of the year gives me a 4, equivalent to a D. I was the only kid who got that grade. Even the kids that did not even turn in their work got a C, 3. She humiliated me in front of all my classmates by pointing straight at me, saying I did bad on an exam. I was 9yo. Kind of why I have anxiety from school till this day. My grade 5 teacher. Every little thing I did she would call me out and get me in trouble no matter what. Before and after that year I never got in trouble. She never helped me no matter what as well. Even though it was my first year out of special ed and needed the extra help in the transition. When I was in her class I fell off the monkey bars and hurt my back really bad. I was screaming in pain and barely could walk. When walking to the office with the playground supervisor, she saw us and told me that I was fine and I should be in class, even though she had sent me home for smaller medical things before. The playground supervisor told her off and went to the office to explain everything and phone my mom to take me to the hospital to get checked out. Let's just say my mom was really happy that she retired before my brother had her, which also meant that she never had to deal with her again. My kindergarten teacher 35 years ago. Here is a few things I remember. Called me out in front of class for coloring a banana poorly. I'm severely nearsighted. This happened approx 6 months before my first pair of glasses. We had a nap rest time. The other class got to lay down on floor mats. We had to rest our head while sitting at our desk. No problem. However, she would yell at anyone whose eyes were open. If you didn't have your eyes closed, you better not face her desk. SWATs were a thing back then for pretty mild behavior and or not getting homework dun. Forced everyone to take a tree's worth of worksheets on the last day of school to practice over the summer. They were just extra copies of what we already did, and everyone talked about how we were just going to throw it out as soon as we got home. My 3rd grade teacher bopped us on the head with a plastic wiffle bat when he didn't like our attitude or answers. Had to stop when he made a girl's head bleed. He hit her barrettes. Not a teacher, but a guidance counselor I had when I was in my final year of school told me I would end up dead in a gutter in 20 years if I didn't go to university. Had a teacher who would give me detention every week. Reasons included talking during a group project, not bringing pencils, having long hair, calling him a bee. For me, my grades 2 to 4 teacher. For some strange reason the school kept her with us for 3 straight years. She was not a nice teacher and always had a frown on. The worst thing she ever did was the school had some kind of bike competition that we could sign up for. Nobody in my class signed up for it, so she kept us in the class away from the event. We could see the whole school watching the event through the window. We were peed. 5th grade teacher. I turned in homework late and he said, well, I'll have to call your parents to talk to them about this. I broke down crying and begged him not to because my stepdad would beat me. So when he called my house while we were eating dinner, he mentioned what I said, and my stepdad was even angrier at me for telling a teacher that he was abusive. Frick that teacher. I had a Spanish teacher who got a job at another high school and decided to not give a darn for the last 5 months of the class. He would sit at his desk and watch The Walking Dead. Sometimes he would say something like, okay class, today, think about Spanish. He then gave us a challenging final exam over material he never taught. My 11th grade history teacher said in front of the whole class that I didn't have the looks to be a meteorologist, which was my dream since I was 5. The class itself was a waste of time since nothing was actually graded, so no one even tried. And this was supposed to be an IBHL class, which is no joke. Since then I graduated from the #1 meteorology program in the US and glowed up big time. Went from over 190 pounds in HS to 155, while he was fired for being a predator. Needless to say, Mr. S can go frick himself. Not worst, but weird. I went to a Christian school, so we have a religion teacher. It's like a theology class, but it's just odd because Mrs. P will always spend the whole session talking about her life experiences. One time, she talked about losing her virginity. She just got married, and how she bled and passed out on the bed after their first time, with full details and everything. I think everyone in class was horrified. In middle school I was partially hospitalized due to some issues I had over the summer. When I went back to school it was only for half days. I was in advanced classes and most of my teachers chipped in to help me since I wasn't completely going to class. The one exception was my advanced math teacher that refused to help me and told me if I had wanted to pass I shouldn't have gotten hospitalized. Middle school was not a fun time for me. Dude was head of IT and did jack crap in his class. I don't understand how this man was getting paid the most in his department. When I say jack crap I mean jack crap. Here's a book. Help each other but don't talk in my class. Frick you mean help each other but don't talk. Majority of the class failed. As I later learned, so did his previous, and the one before that, and the one before that. He was fired the year after I left. If I was only born a year later. It's not that she was a bad teacher, but she just didn't know how to teach a freaking class. This was math class. This was my junior year of high school. Very early in the year all she would do is give us worksheets, not really explain anything and sit behind her desk. And I know students could go to her desk and ask for help, but in the same sense you as the teacher should walk around and check on students, see if they need any help, etc. And she just did not do that. Literally all students in that class were talking about going to a different math class after the trimester was over. One day she confronted us all and asked why we wanted to go to another math teacher's class. Where I'm going with this is basically we had a long discussion on why we thought she was crap at teaching and what she could do better. So she took our advice and started doing what we suggested. She's basically doing better than what she was at the beginning of the year. She's still not the best, but considering how she's teaching these days, it was a big improvement. The last thing she did of this kind was not that long ago. She gave us 3 worksheets about baseball. We had to find the height of the home run walls, how fast the ball was going after being hit, etc. And we as the class would have asked her, but she said we couldn't ask any questions and we needed to figure it out ourselves. I literally went to my sophomore year math teacher for help. He helped me with the first page and said the other 2 were impossible to figure out using math and that we needed to use physics. All the kids were struggling and basically did nothing as we didn't get taught this. We were just shown a video. Like I said, not the best and not the worst. She has her ups and downs, but as of late she's been doing decent. Physics is just math with context. In fact, I'd wager most math problems are physics problems in disguise. Pamela Tharp. She used to throw heavy things at me for no reason. One time I was looking for a paper that I lost and she hid it from me. Then she proceeded to get mad at me for not finding it, so she threw a stapler at me. This was in 2nd grade. I am in 7th grade now and she still works there somehow. I'm gonna need the name of that school. Mine is probably the language arts teacher I had in 6th grade. She was an older lady, in her 60s or so. We were watching the movie called Remember the Titans, and there's a part in this movie where a white younger man asks a young man of color, what does your daddy for a living? Well, if you have a daddy. The teacher pauses the movie and says he asked that question because Negros never have father figures. Now, I am a mixed baby. My father is African American and Puerto Rican, and my mother is Irish and German. During the winter, which is around the time we were watching this movie, I'm quite pale, so it's hard to really tell that I'm mixed, and most people don't know until I tell them. I simply called her out on that, saying that what she said was racist and I personally found it offensive. She asked me why, and I told her because I'm mixed, and my dad is black. She laughed at me, shaking her head and saying, and your real dad isn't around, is he? And I broke down in tears and cried in the middle of the classroom. Cut to the next Monday at school. I get told my classes are getting switched. My whole schedule is changed around. Now I'm not longer in classes with white kids, I'm in classes with people of color. And that's when I realized that my school was segregated. Jump forward a few weeks. Kids start spreading around what happened to me, and it gets to the parents, who begin to go off. The school gets a huge backlash and faces a lawsuit. So because of this little mixed baby right here, my school is no longer segregated. Honestly, it's the biggest accomplishment of my life. I use English as a second language and had a hard time writing essays etc. in high school. My grade 10 English teacher read and mocked my essay on a book aloud. I was embarrassed and never asked her for help again. I still can't believe that happened. It's funny because I am the age she would have been then. Can't believe someone would make another feel that crappy. I know I wouldn't. Had a teacher who would always put assignments on the class calendar at like 8 or 9 PM and expect them in the next day without discussing them the class before. It was quite infuriating. His expectations were never clear and changed depending on the student. He's notorious for being the worst teacher in the school. Everyone had probably cried at least once in the class from feeling just so defeated. The smartest girl in our class got a B, which was a grade the rest of us could only dream of. I remember he assigned homework on Halloween night and nobody had done it because he added it at 10 PM. A student showed their English teacher and she sent him an email asking for the students to be pardoned, and it worked. My year 3 teacher hated me and made an example of me many times. One time I used my school creative writing exercise book to write out a version of Rapunzel I had on tape. I liked it and wanted a copy of my own that I could read, and my exercise book had lines so I could make it neat. I wrote the whole thing out from memory, illustrated it to a certain degree, and I was very happy to finally have my own copy. Teacher looked through the book after a writing assignment, found my copy of Rapunzel, and went ape crap. Stood me in front of the class, exercise book in hand, and told the entire class to never do such a thing. Basically indicated that I'd plagiarized the story, even though I didn't submit it for class credit. As an adult, I know that fairy tales like Rapunzel are part of the public domain. There was nothing wrong with writing out the story, so long as I didn't claim it as my original work nor submit it for class credit. I'm kind of proud of child me for writing that many pages, TBH. Her name was Angela. I was in the 3rd grade. I had terrible issues at the time because my mother was always drugged on coke. My mom never spent time with me or helped me with my homework or helped me read. My teacher should have noticed. I came to school with greasy hair and old clothes. But I want to know why she didn't notice. I remember something she told me. We all had to fill out a math worksheet in class and I clearly didn't know what I was doing. I just put random numbers. My teacher comes up to me, looks at my worksheet, and was clearly unhappy with what I had written. She tells me, "Where did you get these numbers? Did they just fall out of the sky?" She would normally send me to lunch detention because I didn't do my reading logs. We had to read a book every week and fill out a paper that proved we did. I feel like she should have noticed but she didn't. Thankfully, my father came and rescued me. He knew that something wasn't right with me and my mom. He knew. So I lived with him and now I'm taking college classes for law. I think about what would have happened if I stayed with my mom. I love you, Dad. Thank you for saving me. My history teacher in 6th and 8th grades was a one-eyed preacher who came across as half senile and wandered away frequently. He was actually pretty awesome compared to my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Cooper. She allowed a kid to steal some money out of my desk one day when I was absent in the guise of cleaning it. She encouraged my classmates to bully me because of my race, quite often sitting at her desk and ranting about the evils of white people. I was the only white kid in her class and one of very few in the school. One time, another girl had some ointment on her legs that smelled strongly of camphor and made me physically ill. I complained to her that I was feeling nauseous and was dismissed. I was ultimately punished for jumping up and running out of class to vomit. But the kicker of the evil of this woman is something I learned only a few years ago. My best friend now, though at the time we barely knew each other, was in her class too. And that year his mother passed away. Mark was out of the classroom on an errand when the principal told her what had happened. And so she sent the kid who'd been bullying him all year to break the news to him, which he evidently did in the meanest way he could. She knew that kid was a bully. She knew he would be cruel to my friend. And she did it anyway. That's freaking awful. I hate how people that don't belong in this field get in. Amy Voorhees, my 7th grade English teacher. She was such an absolute C. She just hated me and found every excuse to give me a detention or punish me in some way. She was constantly grading my assignments lower than all of the other kids on the class. This one time she gave me a lunch detention because I sneezed during the Pledge of Allegiance because she said her brother fought in Afghanistan and that I was insulting and disrespecting those who served and those who are currently serving. B. I come from a military family. I know what disrespecting is. Another time she told me to write up a detention slip and I told her I didn't have a pencil. I didn't. It was in my locker because I was going to lunch, and she told me to figure it out. I was screwed either way the situation played out. I could have used another student's pencil as that was on a nearby desk but she'd have given me a detention for that. I could have left it blank but she'd have given me a detention. I could have went in her desk to get a pencil but she'd have given me a detention. I just decided to go in her desk for one and, no surprise, she caught me and I got a detention. Little did she know, my aunt was a higher up in my school district. I recorded a few of my encounters with the C of a teacher and then my aunt actually sat in on one of my classes where the teacher, despite being reviewed, still verbally attacked me. Needless to say she was fired and never returned to the school district. Any Voorhees, if you're reading this, frick you. Had a professor in college that made you write a one-page paper if you missed class for any reason. As if we need some sort of incentive to go to a class we're paying thousands of dollars to have. And it was an elective class too. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.